Hi, everybody. This is Donnie Winchell again. Most of you, I hope, have seen the first video, which is sort of a preview of ideas you need to think about before you take the step of opening your winery. If you're watching this, you're likely about ready to make the decision to move forward. And once that happens, there are a lot of things you need to think about before you get too far down the road. And hopefully, this will help you make some of those decisions in a cost-effective and productive way. These are skills, the kinds of things you need to think about building, the production equipment you'll need, things you'll need in the tasting room. Um, the first thing you need to consider when you're looking at this whole wine business is that it has to be all about you. There are four basic elements that you have to identify. You have to be passionate. You have to make sure you allocate enough time. This is not a weekend warrior kind of activity. It takes a lot of physical strength to move barrels around, things to keep tables straight, things to carry cases up and down stairs, things to load that vehicle for all the deliveries you're going to need to make. And you need to establish a variety of skills that you might not have picked up in your philosophy class in college. So passion has to be yours. You have to get up every morning, go to work, and not know that you're going to be going to work. You're going to love what you do, so the work will be a passion rather than a chore. Secondly, you'll be a small business. Even if you have a lot of resources, which many of you do, many of you don't, you're going to need to cover all you can personally, because this winery needs to be a reflection of you, your skills, your ideas, your attitudes, your passion, and your vision for what your wine needs to become. A lot of time involved. You're going to have to either grow grapes or pick them, find a vendor with whom you can work that will have the kind of fruit that you're looking for, that is of quality. Fermentation takes a long time. You have red fermentation, white fermentation. You have all kinds of things that you need to identify that will require your attention and time, face time. Again, this is not something you can necessarily do 1 or 2 days a week and be effective at it and make a good quality product. Record keeping is a huge part of what we do. QuickBooks and just the accounting is just a tiny piece of it. The reports that you have to provide for the federal and state government, accounting that you have to do regarding sanitation and records for safety services, all of those things, EPA, water quality, all are important things that you're going to need to keep very close track of if you're going to be successful and make it through all the regulatory entities that you have to deal with. You're certainly going to have to market. There was a fellow named Leon Adams many years ago, the father of the California wine industry, said one time, if the world doesn't know about you, you can make the best wine in the world and you'll go bankrupt. So you need to have a marketing and sales plan as you move forward very, very quickly, probably just about the same time that you begin working on your A2 and your federal permits. Again, it can be physically demanding. If you are not able to schlock those barrels around, and you can hire some folks, it's not always easy to hire the people who do things the way you want them. So you'll need not only resources, but you'll need people skills to make sure that the physicality that's required of the job will be handled in an appropriate way. And then again, I go back to the kinds of things you learned in your philosophy class or your world history class or your art history class or some rather esoteric series of classes you took someplace in high school or in college. But you're going to need to turn into a refrigeration expert, because when it goes down on 2 o'clock in the morning in the middle of harvest season, you may or may not be able to get someone there to help you right away. You're going to become an electrician, become a plumber. You're going to need to maybe do some diesel repair on your equipment. You're going to have a good nose and a good palate so you can tell that the wines that you're producing are the quality that you want them to be. You need to understand food and wine, because food is so much a part of what we do. You're going to have to be a decent public speaker. You'll have to talk to those Rotary folks. You'll have to talk to Kiwanis. You'll have to talk to the Ladies Garden Club. You'll have to give those tours in the basement. Also, you need to be prepared to deal with the media. If there's a crisis, you need to understand how to deal with that, how to best protect your interests in a crisis situation. You need to be a social media expert. Facebook is easy for some, not so much for others. TikTok is really tough for a lot of folks, and Instagram and Snapchat in between, along with Pinterest, are all things you're going to need to learn. You need to become an ambassador. And very honestly, you'll probably have to be the janitor, because if something backs up in the septic tank, you're going to be the one who's going to be out there fixing it. Again, on a Saturday afternoon when you have a crowd of people and there's no plumber or janitorial staff to find. Based on some recommendations that came out of Todd Steiner's production book that he produced in 2022 on behalf of the grape industries, a guy named Chris Stamp from New York State put together an amazing template of how to move forward in establishing a winery step by step, month by month, dollar by dollar. And in these recommendations, which will come in the book that you will get from the state once you open your doors, I would spend lots of time with the winemaking. But prior to that, you probably need the book to understand what you need in terms of cash flow and equipment. So as a member of the association, we do provide those for you. They retail for $50, and that's part of the benefit of joining what we do. So according to Chris and an observation of hundreds of wineries that we worked with over the years, you need to start with a consideration of a 3,000 to 5,000 gallon startup. 25,000 gallons is a lot of wine to sell. That's 125,000 bottles your first year. Probably not doable. I'm guessing that 85% of the family wineries in Ohio are 5,000 gallons or less. Once you get your arms around those kinds of production numbers, then you can move to the 10, the 15, the 20, the 50, the 100, the 300,000 gallon operations. But start with a manageable number. With that size operation, you need to plan on a building about 1,800 square feet, 2/3 of which should be devoted to production and 1/3 to hospitality. And you need to design it for expansion. If you look at the picture on the screen here, this is Tony Kasich's operation in Harpersfield. And he started out with just a little A-frame building. He added a front entrance, he added a side building, and now he's opened up the outdoors with a beautiful patio and a gazebo. But you need to allow for expansion. So when you design for expansion, think about plumbing, think about electrical lines, think about how much electrical service you're going to need, all those things. Understand that your production floor is going to need to be clean. The best grapes in the world and the best winemaker in the world can turn out some pretty bad wine in a dirty circumstance. So sanitation is critical. As a parenthetical suggestion, I would recommend that some of you maybe sign up for the Kent State Ashtabula class on sanitation that Lauren Fiala teaches. It's a very, very, very good class. You're also going to have to think about the flooring in your tasting areas. Carpeting, probably not such a good idea in a wine tasting area. But tile with a bunch of ridges in it that are hard to clean. So think carefully about what you put on that floor in your tasting room, because you're going to have a lot of people tracking through and you're going to have to keep it sanitized too. Heating. If you can, natural gas still probably is the cheapest of the options out there, because you're going to need a lot of heat for a lot of reasons. If you are into the whole green movement, if your budget allows it, and if the options work in your circumstances, you need to think about that too. Well, in Ohio right now, they only require 1 bathroom for an A2 permit holder. We always recommend that you plumb for 2, because as you grow, you're going to need more bathroom service. And if you ever grow big enough to get what we call an A1A, which is a permit that allows you to serve beer and do events and even some alcohol, you're going to have 2 bathrooms. Septic tank is going to be a problem, especially if you are not in the city. EPA will be probably locally the biggest hurdle that you're going to pass. They are restrictive and restricting. So please make sure you pay attention to what the EPA folks tell you when you put that original septic tank in. There's a story in Northeast Ohio several years ago that a winery put in a $35,000 system. Health department came in and made them tear it down and put in a $75,000 system. So be careful what you do the first time around. Same thing with water. Water quality is going to be tested on a regular basis. So if you are on a well or on a spring, testing that water for good quality is going to be essential all of the time. And make sure that you think about all that water coming off the roofs. You're going to need to have some good exterior foundation drains, because you're going to have a lot of water coming off the roof, but you're also going to have a lot of water coming through your cellar with all the sanitation practices that you need to use. One of the other things you need to think about is how you lay the building out. Gravity is your friend. Pumps are expensive. You'll need a lot of pumps, but if you can use gravity for wine flow, it will be a huge savings and much more efficient. When you're looking at electricity, think about whether or not you want single or 3-phase electricity. If you can afford and a 3-phase is accessible, it makes a big difference in cost efficiency in the long run. You'll use a lot of electricity over the years. Think about the height of your doors. You're going to be bringing equipment in and out, pallets in and out. Make sure that the doors are tall enough to deal with what you have to get in and out of that room. Also, think about loading ramps. Make sure that the loading ramps are there, accessible and appropriate. You're going to have a semi-truck of a semi-trailer backup. with boxes of empty bottle boxes, you're going to have to load those up easily rather than carrying them up and down, up and down, up and down. And make sure everyone says to me, don't skimp on the concrete. I know it's like $175 a square these days, but use 6 inches. It will be much cheaper in the long run than pouring 4 and having to replace it. Think about storage. You're going to have a lot of storage. You're going to have empty bottles come in, and then you're going to have bottles ready to label, because you don't want to take the bottles out of the basement area until the label is on, because in Ohio, at least, you only begin paying tax on the labeled wine. So unlabeled wine is going to have to be stored someplace before you put it into your in a room where you can move it upstairs for sales. Think about crush pad and cellar access. We had a beautiful winery in Columbus a number of years ago called William Greystone. They were in a downtown area, great downtown hip area where lots of activity was going on. But Greystone had a little tiny door off of a public parking lot where they had to bring everything in and out. And it was a very, very difficult, onerous task. Think about traffic flow. You're going to have production and you're going to have customer traffic. You don't necessarily want the two to cross. So think about where your barrels are going to come in, where your grapes are going to come in, where your bottles are going to come in, and make sure that they are not passing the path that the consumers need to get into your front door. Also, think about parking. We have another winery that I talk to all the time. It was a very successful operation. They opened with about 25 slots. It wasn't very long before they needed 50 slots, and now they need 100 slots. So think about where you're going to park people, allowing them for growth. So whatever you think probably is the right size is likely going to be too small if you're going to grow. Also, think about where you put the building. I will probably mention this later on, but so many wineries put their building on top of this beautiful knoll and put their vineyards down below them, and the vineyards freeze, frost, and they're stuck with the building where it is, and they have to find new locations to plant those vines because as air and water flow downhill, so does frost and spring damage. Think about handicap access. You must have a hard surface parking lot for handicap, and the number of handicap slots will be determined by your seating area. So think about having hard surface for that. And finally, the last thing, think about where you're going to place your deck. Do not place your deck on the east side of your building because very few people will be there early enough to watch the sunrise. But sunset in wine country can be magical. So think about using your future deck so that they can enjoy those sunsets. Production. Make sure that your press is large enough, but not too big. There is a really good network of used equipment. Stainless steel doesn't go bad, so there's a lot of resale equipment out there. We can help you find those. You're going to need a crusher and destemmer. You're going to need some must pumps. You're going to hoppers. You're going to need tanks. If you have the ability to afford jacketed tanks, really begin that way. In the old days, I remember seeing wineries that were running cold water over the top of red fermenting tanks to cool them down. You really don't want to do that. And also a suggestion, make sure that if you're going to have the tanks developed just for you, designed just for you, think about fixable and variable lids. Think about where the man entrance is going to be placed. If you're going to have to clean those tanks out, you're going to have it big enough for somebody to get in and easy enough to have them accessible. Also, think about the height of your legs and the diameter of them. Think about if you're going to have to drain that out from the bottom, think about where your valves are going to be and think about what you want to use for the material for those tanks. Stainless is very expensive. Cement is ever more popular. Those eggs are out there all the time, and some folks even use plastic. So think about the tanks and jacket it if you can. Think about a refrigeration system. Visit the trade shows. The tank manufacturers will help you lots with the refrigeration systems recommendations. Think about getting a pad filter. You need a pad filter so that you clean things up. Are you going to start with a hand bottler? Maybe. You're going to start with a hand labeler? Maybe. You start with a hand corker? Maybe. Those would be available probably on the used market, and they will have good resale value as you grow. You'll need hoses. You'll need a pallet jack. You need lots of hose fittings. You need variable speed pumps, and you'll need a good lab, some good lab equipment. And honestly, you're going to need a lot of hand tools because you're going to be doing all those electrical and plumbing things we talked about earlier. Think about your grounds. There is a mantra in the home building business. If you spend an extra $10,000 on an entrance to a housing complex, you can increase the asking price of each of those houses in that development by at least $10,000. So you're going to have some sidewalks that are good looking, that are wide so people can cross them, make sure they're 6 inches of concrete again, make sure they're wide so a couple can walk next to each other as they come in. Make sure your parking lot has good drainage and stone at the beginning, but again, that handicap surface. And think about investing $5,000 or $10,000 in your entrance. It will pay dividends back. It won't take you long if you charge an extra 50 cents a bottle over a year to pay back for that investment you made in a very good looking, very good looking entrance and landscaping. And make sure that what you do with your landscaping reflects your logo and that the word wine is prominent on the highway signage as well as in the entrance signage that we'll talk about later. We'll have a whole section on signage as a part of this series. Tasting room. You need to think about what your tasting room needs to be. You need to have it warm and inviting. It can be antique, it can be modern, but it can't be sterile. We had a winery in Ohio that makes lovely, lovely, lovely wine. But you walk in there and the walls were sort of a dirty gray, and he had a few not so interesting things hanging on the walls, and he had picnic tables and a cold concrete floor. It just was unappealing, and he didn't do very well when it came to visitation. Tables and chairs, open-ended picnic tables if you use them, because people have a hard time climbing over those crossbars. Soft seating, clustering, and so nothing should be secured at the floors. We are working a lot with people who like to gather with friends, so let them move things around so they can enjoy one another's company. Make sure that you have service windows. Make sure that the things are accessible so that when you're working behind the kitchen or behind the tasting room, you can serve easily those guests that are coming into your area. We did a survey of POS systems. In Ohio, at least, most of the wineries use either Clover or Square, unless they have a large restaurant operation, and then they use something called Toast. Again, do some homework, visit the trade shows. All of the vendors will help you make good choices. Wine glasses. Please do not use bad wine glasses. No beaded rim. Use ones with a cut rim. You want a good quality wine glass. You spent all of that time making great wine, and you put them in a lousy glass. We'll be doing a lot of demonstrations over the next couple of years where we hope we come to some of those dinners to illustrate how good wine glasses make a difference in how the wine actually tastes. Certainly, you may have to use plastic for large crowds if you're outside. And you need to think about logoed glasses. Logoed glasses, especially in an outside environment, tend to disappear. Make sure you have a 3-bin sink. A dishwasher is important if you can. You'll need a simple kitchen. You need to have some sort of food. But I will share with you that in Ohio now, if you produce less than 10,000 gallons of wine, if you post with the Department of Agriculture that you are not required to have a food service license, and if you post on the wall that you have a you're excluding from food service licensure, and if you serve only prepackaged goods, you do not need a food service license in Ohio. It's a little bit tricky, and we'll address that much more directly in another video. But think about if you are starting off, if you set up for a kitchen, perhaps that's an option. But honestly, think about just prepackaged food if the kitchen is too much of a capital investment for you. Give them a cheese board, give them a knife, and give them some prepackaged food. You'll need a refrigerator and a cooler. You'll need an ice machine. People are going to want water. You're going to have ice to keep those chill bottles of wine cold. You're going to have a couple computers, some office desks and chairs. You're going to need a copier, and you're going to need some display racks. I will share with you if you can put your display racks fairly near the exit, but not so much that they can 5-figure discount and walk out with them, but it will encourage sales to go. And make sure your register is close to the exit so you can control all of that in and out traffic and those sales. Finally, we're going to do more on permits, on zoning, on marketing plans, on business, on financing, lots and lots and lots of topics. I hope this series will be of help to you. It's fun for us to do, and it hopefully, once you review these kinds of things, come see us, join the association, and we'll help you in all we can, making your transition from that dream through passion to success part of your story. Thanks.